It was a crisp Monday morning at the Naval Academy, where cadets marched in precise formation. Suddenly, a sleek black SUV rolled up to the gate, its tinted windows drawing puzzled stares. When the door opened, Clint Eastwood stepped out, briefcase in hand, radiating that famous steely resolve. Cadet Sarah Miller watched from a distance, whispering to her friend, "Ethan, what's he doing here?" Ethan shook his head. "No clue, but this is definitely not routine." Without further explanation, Eastwood strode across the grounds, pausing only to tell an officer, "I'm here to see your best cadets. Have them meet me inside." In that instant, everyone realized this wasn't just another day at the Naval Academy. It was the start of something far bigger. A wave of curiosity swept through the Naval Academy the moment Clint Eastwood passed through the front gate. Most cadets remained stoic, adhering to protocol, but beneath their calm exteriors burned 1,000 unspoken questions. Whispered speculation floated through the ranks. Why would a legendary actor and director, known for his tough-as-nails persona, show up at one of the nation's most disciplined military institutions? Inside the main building, officers scrambled to adjust schedules as word spread. Eastwood's arrival had been unannounced, and his only instruction, "Gather your finest cadets. I want to speak with them," left everyone guessing. Was this a motivational visit? A government collaboration? Nobody knew. Yet the tension in the corridors felt electric, as though history were about to be made. Cadet Lieutenant Sarah Miller stood among a small group handpicked for this meeting. She tried to appear calm, but her mind raced. She and her friend Ethan had been at the gates moments earlier, witnessing Eastwood's dramatic entrance. Now they waited in a modest briefing room with a handful of top-performing cadets, none of them entirely sure what to expect. When Eastwood finally entered, his steps were purposeful, and his gaze swept the room like a spotlight searching for hidden potential. There was no grand speech, just a measured silence that commanded more respect than any shouted order. He placed a small leather briefcase on a nearby table, meeting the eyes of each cadet in turn. Sarah's heart pounded. Her father had once told her that true leaders carry themselves with an almost eerie calm, and as she studied Eastwood's composed demeanor, she couldn't shake the sense that he'd arrived with a plan destined to upend everything they thought they knew. And in that moment, standing alongside her fellow cadets, she realized she was about to find out exactly what that plan entailed. Eastwood's silence lingered for a moment in the briefing room, gripping everyone's attention far more than any long-winded speech could. At last he cleared his throat, just enough to make a point, and surveyed the small gathering of cadets. "Which one of you is Cadet Lieutenant Sarah Miller?" he asked, scanning the faces in front of him. Sarah felt her stomach flip. She stepped forward and snapped to attention. "Sir, that's me." Eastwood studied her with a measured gaze, his expression giving nothing away. "I've heard about you," he said quietly. "Top of your class in tactical leadership, specialized in search and rescue drills. Impressive." Sarah swallowed hard, unsure whether he was praising her or simply stating facts. "Thank you, sir," she managed, keeping her voice steady. She couldn't guess what Eastwood wanted with her specifically. There were at least a dozen cadets with stellar records in that very room. Without warning, Eastwood turned on his heel and approached the rest of the group. "I'm here for more than a visit," he said, letting his words settle. "I have an initiative in mind, something that will test not just your skills but your resolve." A ripple of curiosity spread among the cadets. Ethan, standing near the back, shot Sarah a quizzical glance. She returned a faint shrug. She was just as perplexed. Then Eastwood pivoted sharply back to Sarah. "I'm told you're the kind who never backs down from a challenge, am I right?" Sarah held his gaze, her posture rigid. "I do my best, sir." Eastwood nodded as though confirming a hunch. "Good," he said, turning back to address the entire room. "You'll need that drive. In fact, you'll all need it." He paused, letting the gravity of his words take hold. Around him the officers remained silent, apparently just as in the dark as the cadets were. Whatever Eastwood had planned, it wasn't coming from the Academy's usual chain of command. Finally, he lifted his leather briefcase onto the table, his hand lingering on the latch. "This place has discipline," he continued, "but there's something more I'm looking for. Initiative, grit, compassion even." Then, locking eyes with Sarah, he added, "And I think I've found a candidate worth challenging." The entire room seemed to exhale, tension easing into a hush of anticipation. Sarah's pulse raced. She'd worked tirelessly for every accolade, every leadership position, yet something about Eastwood's personal attention left her both flattered and uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the first step in a much larger test, one that would change her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Sarah followed Eastwood out of the briefing room, her pulse throbbing with anticipation. The other cadets watched them go, their eyes filled with questions that no one dared to voice. Outside, the crisp morning air stung Sarah's cheeks, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were centered on why Eastwood wanted her specifically. They walked in silence past rows of drill fields and training equipment. At last, Eastwood paused beside an imposing obstacle course, one notorious among cadets for its brutal walls, muddy trenches, and rope climbs that tested even the most seasoned recruits. He turned to Sarah. "You want to lead, right?" "Yes, sir," she answered, her voice steady despite the nerves. Eastwood studied the course for a moment, then pointed toward the starting line. "Show me." Sarah blinked. "Right now?" He nodded, eyes narrowing in that signature Eastwood way. Confidence is a leader's best friend. If you can't rise to the challenge under pressure, you'll never inspire anyone else. A tense silence fell. Sarah glanced at the course's towering barriers and felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Still, she knew backing down wasn't an option. Taking a breath, she approached the start, adrenaline surging through her veins. On his signal, she took off. Mud splashed as she tackled the first trench, crawling beneath low-hanging netting that snagged at her uniform. Ignoring the stinging cuts on her forearms, she pushed onward. At the wall climb, she slipped once, her boots struggling against the slick surface, but she set her jaw and fought her way up. Every second felt longer than the last. Every step demanded more strength than she thought she had. From the sidelines, Eastwood watched intently. An instructor or two had drifted over, word spreading about this personal challenge. They murmured in surprise. Few cadets attempted this course on the fly, and even fewer did so on a day's notice. When Sarah finally vaulted the last obstacle, her lungs burned and her uniform dripped with mud. She stumbled across the finish line, breath ragged, heart thudding in her ears. Eastwood approached her, arms folded. "Not bad," he said quietly, his voice carrying enough weight to feel like thunder. A faint glimmer of respect appeared in his eyes. "But this is just the beginning." And in that moment, gasping for air, sweat mixing with grit on her brow, Sarah realized she'd proven her endurance but had only scratched the surface of whatever Eastwood had planned. An hour after Sarah's grueling run through the obstacle course, the sun hung higher, bathing the academy yard in bright light. Most cadets would have been dismissed for a well-earned break, but Eastwood had other plans. He gathered Sarah and a few select cadets in a wide-open training field dotted with crates, ropes, and rugged gear. The makeshift arena buzzed with anticipation. A few senior officers stood on the sidelines, uncertain whether they should intervene or just observe. Eastwood's authority, though unofficial, seemed absolute. Something about his presence, and the rumors that he had government ties, kept everyone on edge. He looked each cadet in the eye. "You've all proven you can handle routine discipline," he said, his gravelly voice carrying across the field. "But real leadership isn't about routine. It's about what you do when the unexpected comes crashing in." Sarah, still sore from her earlier challenge, felt her muscles protest. She traded a glance with Ethan, who seemed equally tense. The rest of the cadets waited in silence, adrenaline pooling in their veins. "You'll be split into teams," Eastwood continued. "Each team faces a timed series of challenges, building a makeshift bridge, navigating rough terrain, and solving a crisis scenario." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Your goal isn't just to complete these tasks. It's to prove you can work together under pressure." A few cadets shuffled, wondering if this was a test of friendship or raw skill. Eastwood offered no clarification, just handed each team a small instruction sheet and pointed to where they should begin. Sarah's team included Ethan and 3 others she knew only by reputation. One known for his sharp shooting scores, another praised for her top-notch engineering skills, and the third recognized for strategy and war games. A formidable group on paper, but they'd never been tested under real, cohesive pressure. As soon as Eastwood gave the signal, they raced off. First came the bridge-building challenge. Under a timer ticking ominously, they used rope, planks, and haphazard materials to span a narrow ravine. Sarah barked orders, Ethan hustled to tie knots, and the engineering-minded cadet quickly improvised a stabilizing method. They managed to finish just before time ran out. Next, they navigated a winding path littered with debris and concealed hazards. At every misstep, an alarm sounded, docking valuable points. Each slip tested Sarah's leadership. Could she keep morale high when mistakes happened? She gritted her teeth, encouraging her teammates to recalibrate and push on. Even Ethan, who often questioned authority, found himself listening intently to her directions. By the time they reached the final crisis scenario, a mock rescue of a wounded cadet pinned under debris, everyone was drenched in sweat and panting for breath. Yet, something in Sarah clicked into place. She orchestrated each role. Who would lift the debris? Who would stabilize the victim? Who'd call for backup? Working as one, they accomplished the rescue with moments to spare. When the buzzer sounded, the team collapsed in relief. Eastwood stood a short distance away, arms folded with a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't applaud or congratulate them. Instead, he motioned for them to regroup around him. "Well done," he said simply. "But teamwork isn't about just getting by, it's about forging trust, fast." His gaze flicked to Sarah. "You think that's something you can teach others?" Sarah swallowed, still catching her breath. "Yes, sir," she managed, "I do." "Good," Eastwood replied, stepping back, "because this test was only the beginning." He left those words lingering in the air, and though everyone stood victorious, a deep sense of unfinished business charged the atmosphere. Something bigger was on the horizon, something that demanded a whole new level of grit. Later that day, Eastwood summoned the cadets back to the same briefing room where it all began. The atmosphere felt charged, as though a silent current pulsed in the air. Sarah, Ethan, and a handful of others stood at attention, trying to mask their curiosity. Eastwood placed his leather briefcase on the table once more, but this time he opened it without hesitation. Inside were folders marked Operation Valor in bold lettering. Eastwood lifted the top folder for everyone to see. "What you went through today," he said, voice low and controlled, "was only a glimpse of what real leadership demands. Operation Valor is about taking that leadership, your discipline, your grit, and using it where it matters most." He paused, scanning the room. "We'll be pairing some of our finest cadets with young people from tough backgrounds, kids who've never been shown what's possible. Your mission is to mentor them, guide them, and help them discover their potential." A hush fell over the group. Ethan exchanged a quick look with Sarah, a silent question flickering in his eyes. "Is this for real?" Sarah felt the magnitude of Eastwood's words sink in. She'd expected more physical tests, more drills, but a mentorship program, that required a different kind of strength. She found her voice. "Why us, sir? Why this academy?" Eastwood's gaze held hers, unwavering. "Because, Lieutenant Miller, this place represents the best of discipline and resolve, and you—" He paused, letting the weight of his words land. "You represent what happens when skill meets heart." He gestured to the folders. "Study the details. You'll see profiles of the teens you'll be paired with. They come from places where hope is scarce and trust is earned, not given. This is your chance to prove that leadership is more than chain of command. It's about lifting others up." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Eastwood gently closed the briefcase, the snap of the latch echoing in the stillness. "Tomorrow, you'll meet them, and from here on out, your training isn't just about you. It's about them, too." In that instant, Sarah realized every challenge she'd faced up to now, every grueling obstacle course, every test of mental toughness, had been preparing her for something far bigger than herself. And with Operation Valor officially unveiled, there was no turning back. The following morning, a group of restless teens arrived at the Naval Academy's community hall, most sporting skeptical expressions, torn jeans or hoodies. They clearly didn't share the cadets' polished appearance or rigid bearing. Yet they'd all been brought here for the same purpose, to be mentored by some of the Navy's finest. Sarah stood at the edge of the room, scanning the new arrivals. She recognized a familiar, hard-edged look in several of them, an air of defiance that said, "I don't need anyone's help." Before long, she spotted Malik, a wiry 15-year-old with piercing eyes. He sat alone, hood pulled low, arms crossed defensively. Summoning a gentle confidence, Sarah approached him. "Hey, I'm Sarah," she began. "You're Malik, right?" He barely looked up, muttering something under his breath. She knelt to his eye level. "I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here to learn about who you are and what you want." Malik shrugged, gaze fixed on the floor. "I already know what I want," he muttered, "and it's not this." Across the room, Clint Eastwood watched from a discreet distance, arms folded. An instructor ventured a comment. "Think Miller can handle that kid?" Eastwood's gaze remained steady. "If she truly wants to lead, she'll find a way." Sarah sensed Malik's frustration and doubt, but she also saw flickers of potential. Behind his guarded demeanor there was a sharpness, a readiness to test boundaries. Rather than pressing him, she offered a small, genuine smile. "I get it," she said. "This is new. We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Though Malik rolled his eyes, he didn't walk away, and that in Sarah's mind was the first small victory. In the days ahead, she'd have to prove that this Operation Valor wasn't just another empty initiative. But for now, forging a single connection with a wary teen felt like the best possible start. Over the next several days, Sarah learned firsthand that mentorship was no simple task. Malik rarely spoke except to make sarcastic comments or shrug off her attempts to connect. He'd show up to their scheduled meetings but offered little more than scowls and muttered replies. She tried icebreakers, asking about his life, his interests, only to be met with silence or a dismissive, "You wouldn't understand." Yet Sarah refused to give up. She'd remind herself of the training that got her this far, persistence, empathy, and the willingness to adapt. She tried different approaches, inviting him to watch a short drill demonstration, letting him tinker with the Academy's equipment under supervision. Nothing seemed to fully crack his tough exterior. Then one afternoon, as she walked into the rec room early, she found Malik hunched over a sketch pad, pencil in hand. She moved closer, curious, and glimpsed a detailed drawing of a sleek battleship. "That's impressive," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. She noted the sharp lines, the accurate proportions. He had a real knack for design. Malik quickly tried to hide the sketch. "It's nothing," he muttered. Sarah knelt beside him. "Actually, it looks like you've got an eye for naval architecture. Where'd you learn to draw like that?" His guard went up again, but she could tell he was secretly pleased by the compliment. Finally, he shrugged. "Just stuff I picked up online. I like ships, that's all." She offered a genuine smile. "You know, a lot of these cadets here study ship design and engineering. Might be something you'd want to try someday." Malik's expression flickered with something, maybe curiosity, maybe hope, before he looked away. "Kids like me don't get those chances," he said quietly. Sarah's heart twisted at the resignation in his voice. "Kids like me." It reminded her of the very reason Operation Valor existed. "What if you do?" she asked, gently. "What if we help you figure out a path to pursue this, really pursue it?" He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. In that moment, Sarah realized she'd found a small crack in Malik's defenses, his interest in ships. And if she could nurture that spark, maybe she could help him see that opportunities existed beyond the world he knew. Clint Eastwood happened to walk by and observe the exchange. Later, he commented to an instructor, "She's learning that real leadership isn't barking orders. It's finding the hidden spark in someone and igniting it." And so, a slow but meaningful transformation began, for both Malik and Sarah. Each conversation about ship design chipped away at his cynicism. Each moment she spent genuinely listening taught her the essence of what Eastwood's challenge was all about. They were building something far more lasting than a bridge or a wall climb. They were building trust. While Sarah continued to build a cautious rapport with Malik, Clint Eastwood took matters into his own hands, though few knew it at the time. One late afternoon, he quietly left the Naval Academy grounds, driving into a modest neighborhood on the city's outskirts. He parked outside a weathered apartment building and made his way up a narrow flight of stairs, eventually knocking on a door scuffed from years of wear. When the door opened, Malik's mother, exhausted from juggling multiple jobs, blinked in surprise. The man standing before her was a living legend, but his manner was calm, almost humble. She hesitated, unsure whether to let him in. "I'm Clint Eastwood," he said simply, offering a slight nod. "May I come in?" Her first instinct was caution, but something about his direct gaze convinced her to step aside. In the cramped living room, he noticed the faded furniture, the pile of bills on the coffee table, and a framed photo of Malik grinning, his guard apparently down for once. Eastwood set his leather briefcase on a small TV stand, carefully unclasping it. "I've been working with your son," he explained. "He's gifted, but he needs resources and a belief in his own future. She gave a weary sigh. I do my best to keep him in school, keep food on the table, but it's not easy. He's a bright kid, but... Her voice trailed off, frustration and love mingling in her eyes. Eastwood handed her a plain envelope. Inside is an opportunity, he said. A chance for Malik to pursue ship design or engineering if that's what he wants. It's a scholarship offer covering tuition at a specialized summer program for young designers. Malik's mother tore open the envelope, her hand shaking. A thick brochure for an engineering prep course fell out, along with an official-looking letter confirming a spot for Malik. Costs covered. She stared at it in disbelief, tears brimming in her eyes. Why? She whispered, meeting Eastwood's gaze. Why do this for us? He paused, voice low. Because some kids just need to know the world hasn't given up on them. Then he gently closed his briefcase, tipped his head in farewell, and left. Later that evening, Ethan cornered Sarah in the academy hallway, his brow furrowed. Did you hear about Eastwood's little field trip? He's throwing money around? Feels like a publicity stunt, if you ask me. Sarah squared her shoulders. What if it's not? Maybe it's the only way Malik gets a real shot at his dreams. Ethan frowned but couldn't deny the transformation he'd already glimpsed in Malik, who was showing up more consistently, letting down his guard bit by bit. Skepticism aside, even Ethan had to admit something real was happening here, something that went beyond military drills and official ranks. It was about one kid and one legendary mentor, proving that a single act of belief could ripple out and change a life forever. A week later, Clint Eastwood launched a leadership camp that pushed both cadets and teens beyond anything they'd faced before. The goal wasn't just about stamina, it was about teamwork, strategy, and adapting under pressure. Sarah, now more confident in her mentor role, led a group including Malik. In a mock search and rescue, Malik surprised everyone by spotting a hidden clue, earning a rare smile from Sarah. Next, they built a makeshift raft from barrels and rope, then rowed across a man-made lake. Malik, absorbing every design tip, quietly offered solutions that held the raft steady, nodding when Sarah praised him. By sundown, exhausted teams gathered in the courtyard, sweat-soaked yet proud. Eastwood addressed them, voice filled with quiet satisfaction. Today, you proved leadership isn't about ranks. It's about trust, perseverance, and belief in each other. As dusk settled, the cadets sensed this was only the beginning of a much larger journey. By day's end, the auditorium was packed with cadets, mentors, and teens all sensing something big was coming. When Clint Eastwood took the stage, he spoke calmly, yet decisively. Operation Valor, he said, started as an experiment to see if discipline, courage, and mentorship could do more than standard training. From what I've seen, it's changed lives, both for you cadets and for the young men and women who never dreamed they'd be welcome here. A ripple of excitement spread through the crowd. Sitting beside Malik, Sarah noticed a spark of pride in his eyes, so different from the guarded teen she'd first met. I'm proud to announce, Eastwood continued, that Operation Valor will expand nationwide, connecting youth with those who carry the torch of service and leadership. Thunderous applause broke out. Some of the teens who once scorned discipline were now cheering. Cadets exchanged grins, realizing their impact would reach far beyond the academy. Raising a hand for silence, Eastwood ended with a quiet promise, this is just the beginning, because building a legacy means every generation lifts the next, leaving no one behind. He stepped off the podium to a standing ovation. Sarah glanced at Malik, who was still clapping, his eyes locked on the stage. In that moment, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. In the days following Operation Valor's nationwide announcement, the academy buzzed with excitement. Yet for Sarah, the real triumph was seeing Malik, once withdrawn and skeptical, carry himself with new confidence. After their final mentor session, Malik handed her a note. Later that evening, she unfolded it to find his heartfelt words. Sarah, thanks for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Because of you, and Clint Eastwood, I guess, I'm applying to an engineering program. Maybe I actually have a shot. Malik. Moved to tears, Sarah realized one small conversation about a sketch had changed Malik's path forever. She found Eastwood near the Academy's memorial wall, tracing his fingers over the etched names. When he saw the note, he nodded. Sometimes it just takes one person to show someone else what's possible. In the weeks that followed, Malik was accepted into a specialized engineering course. The day he told Sarah, his grin lit up the corridor, dissolving any memory of the kid who once refused to talk. Looking back, Sarah understood. Operation Valor was never about flash or glory. It was about individuals, cadets and teens, discovering hope in each other. And as Malik stepped toward a future he'd once believed unreachable, Sarah realized the greatest victories often happen quietly, in the hearts of those who finally believe they can.